Welcome to Global Health and Wellness Practitioners YouTube channel, where we're giving a platform for great practitioners to leave a part of their legacy in recording and archiving it for eternity. So today we're talking to Charlotte Scott. She's been a birth doula for 12 and plus years. Her story is just beautiful, how she came into it. It's completely organic how it happened. She was helping pregnant women in being calm and doing yoga and embodying themselves to stay present in their bodies. And the women started to ask her to the actual births. And so she's been doing this work. And one of her biggest missions now, after doing it for so long, is to spread the education, the resources, so that more women can be empowered and take the ownership of how strong and powerful we are, and to own that in our birth. I hope you get to hear all of her story, because it's just beautiful and touching. So welcome, Charlotte, and it's so great to have you here after knowing you through different practitioners for over 10 years.
Right.
And
you are virtually in the same place, which is wonderful. Thank you. I'm really appreciative of you putting all your energy into getting some healing messages out there. And you've struck a chord with me because you're talking about my passion. I am so excited. Is that the right word? I'm excited all the time about it, but I'm also encouraged because I do see the waves of trend coming. And it's because, there are courageous women across the decades that have been talking about this. And now we have so many more platforms, this being one of them, right? That we can really get a message out there that birth is been looked at in a certain way in our society for many decades now. We really, honor the technology that we have. We give a lot of power to it. And when it comes to birth, it really has just taken it over, where women have been seen more as the data versus, each individual woman and what she's going through. And that's really what we want. We want women to be able to have what they want. So I would never sit here and say every woman has to have a natural birth. That's not true. We can talk about what natural even means, but I'll get to that in a second. What we really are needing more than anything is educated women being able to ask for what they need. And that is not the standard of care. The standard of care is, we know more than you. The data says that if you're this old, or you've had this many children, or you've had this many cesareans, or you have more than one baby in there, that this is your risk, and so we're going to treat you as if those risks will happen. I want to take a moment to say I am one of the first people that will say, when that medical intervention for a woman to be able to become a mother is necessary, I applaud it. It's why we have it. I just don't want it to be the standard of care.
right.
I want the standard of care to reflect where we really are with the knowledge about birth. And in many ways, one of my friends says, he's got a wonderful podcast. We're going to put it in resources. Dr. Boots Taylor, Ask Dr. B. His thing was always bring birth back. He met a bunch of midwives, home birth midwives, as a obstetrician and perinatologist, and was like, hold on, wait a minute. And he's one of the, wonderful people out there that is saying these information. But it was that recognition that what we've actually done is we've taken birth away from women. we've, and, initially it was like, here, how can we help women have an easier time? Well, unfortunately, we were unable to really look at, listening to her innate wisdom. It's been taken over for a long time. I mean, I believe it was King Louis from France that wanted to see his wife give birth. And, so he had his throne and a piece of fabric between him and his wife. And he wanted to see the birth and he couldn't see. So he said, make her get on her back so I can see. I want to be able to see my child be born. So there you go. King Louis kind of started this thing where, obstetricians were all taught to catch babies to prevent problems sitting between her legs, with a hazmat suit on, which has gotten even worse in this environment.
And
go ahead.
You also said that that we did give it at first. We were like, yeah, without pain. And so everybody signed up.
Sign me up for that. And I think this is a good place to tell my birth story real quick. And what jumped me in here as far as where I feel like my soul was always moving me in this direction. Was I was a 16-year-old girl giving birth in 1974. And I was sitting on my back porch with a bunch of women that had several children between them, 8, 9, something like that. And all of these women, while they sat around and sipped their wine and had their cigarettes and joked around with each other and guiding me to what I was about to go to, they don't even know how to time contractions. They don't even understand contractions very well at all. As soon as I was having some gentle contractions, they were like, oh, it's time to go. Not a single person ever told me, not one of those women that said, hey, Charlotte, here's what you need to expect. I had no idea. And so I got to the hospital, they give me IVs, and they don't tell me what's in them, and they don't tell me how I'm going to feel. And they whisked me away in a wheelchair. And the only thing I remember out of that 3-day experience is the hallucinations from the scopolamine and the morphine they gave me that kept me sedated. And then 12 hours after my son was born, they brought him to me. And I woke up surrounded by both the dad's family and my family, and they were handing me this glowing ball of light because actually I was so high from all those drugs that I didn't even know what had just happened. That is where that was the standard of care that was beginning to change in 1974. But even before that, women were birthing mostly on their backs. And, midwives and doctors were trained so that this is the best position to reduce any danger. And it's really all about the shoulder rotation. Shoulder dystocia, we have a lot of practices that we've kept in place so that the team is prepared for shoulder dystocia. And, I appreciate that they have that training. And again, there's so many things. I just quickly on one of my other births was that I wanted to do it without medication. And this is my third birth. And the provider insisted on an epidural because my baby was what we call posterior, occiput posterior, or OP, meaning sunny side up, facing backwards. And he had to go in and rotate the baby. And I've been doing this work for a long time, and I have a whole nice big bag of skills, the tools I've acquired over the years. But one of the very simplest ones is, how about let's just rotate her over onto her hands and knees. Let's just go with her natural inclination to move, to stand up and get vertical, to get on her hands and knees, to lean, to move. All of those things are instincts inside of us. But we told women, lay down, stay on this monitor, be on your back, and somehow move through this incredible process without being able to use that innate wisdom. That's where we lost it. And that's where we even handed it away, as you said. It was like, you hear women even now all the time, I just want to get to the hospital, get my epidural. I don't feel any pain. The pain is really relative when it comes to birth. There isn't not everybody experiences it the same. And I've attended a lot of births where women would say, that might have been intense, but they didn't call it painful. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's where we can begin to, and have begun to, why is it for some women an incredibly traumatic, painful, dramatic process, and others, babies just slide right out and into their mama's arms with relatively little pain. I'm not going to pretend that when a baby emerges from your body, it isn't very intense. It is. But intensity and drama and trauma and pain, those are all different words. And our media has really shown us that what birth looks like is, first of all, you have to be having an argument with somebody in a public place and your water breaks. It's like traditional TV, right? And then your water breaks, and then it's an emergency. It's like, oh my goodness, I've got to get where I'm going to give birth. And then it's really everything like it is blows up, and you're like, oh my God. And it's actually life and death if and it really makes us believe that birth, while we are moving through those veils of the worlds, coming from our other world into this dimensional world, that event isn't necessarily that emergent life and death situation. By looking at it that way, we have to have medical providers. We must have doctors. We must have hospitals that are going to protect us from that.
Like you said, the fear is really dramatized. And
it is. And fear is real. It's real when it comes to birth. In fact, it's really the key to moving out of a managed birth into a physiological birth. And the difference there is, managed is we don't really trust women's bodies. We trust data and technology. Like, that's where we're going to put the trust. And so there's a lot of managed care, constant fetal monitoring, interventions like induction and augmentation, and the use of drugs like Pitocin, Cervidil, Cytotec, all those things that we're forcing women's bodies to do in a timely fashion based on the data, what we want them to do. And then, of course, manage also how long it takes. If it's taking too long, you add Pitocin. If it's going too fast, you reduce everything. And, maybe the doctor's busy in another room, or the staff needs, to have more time. And so you can lay there on an epidural for a very long time. And unless your baby's just falling out, they don't have to be in your room, catching your baby, which is, when the medical staff shows up. And, that managed is lack of trust, overly reliance on the technology. Physiological is trust the body, trust the innate wisdom. I mean, we've been giving birth for a very long time. Check the planet, check the population. It works. And it works best when it's a physiological approach, because we have an internal pharmacy that gives us everything we need. It gives us the endorphins, it gives us the oxytocin, it gives us the things that we need to manage pain. We have brain chemistry that's 200 times more powerful than morphine, and we need to be able to activate it. And through the process of birth, everything is happening as it needs to. The every step of the way, there's a process, and there's a really beautiful process by one of my teachers called the Holistic Stages of Labor. I'm going to include that link. That is amazing. She really, Wapio Bartlett, was one of those people that really broke it down for us, that said here, from conception to birth is the physiology of the body, and it's a dance. It's a beautiful dance that flows, and it flows as it needs to. And granted, we have times when it doesn't, and that, is when we need to address it from a more medical standpoint. But in order to just see birth as the process that it is, that women go through, that is natural and normal and physiological, we want to be able to listen to her, follow her, let her be the guide. And that comes with embodiment and alignment and education. Those things are pivotal to women being able to be prepared for that physiological birth. And physiology to me is that we let it happen when it's time for it to happen. Let her, I hate to even use those words, women being supported to trust their bodies to go into labor in a timely fashion. The amount of inductions that we do is ridiculous, and for so many reasons, and it's all about fear. So fear keeps us in fight flight, and the more you tell a woman, you might not be able to have this baby on time, baby's too big, you're too old, the history, the data of babies that are stillborn can be used with women at birth to instill that fear. And I'm not discounting that bad things happen, because they do.
Right, right.
However, when we trust good things to happen and empower women with tools to guide them through the process of physiological, normal, natural, if you will, then the body unfolds and you have an uncomplicated birth. And what supports that, of course, is when we have that alignment. And the alignment is, I'm going to go back to one of my teachers who is such a wonderful influence on women's bodies in general. He's long gone, and that's Don Aligio. And he was the one that really taught one of my teachers, Rosita Arvigo, about my abdominal massage. And that is that when a woman's womb is out of balance, she is out of balance physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that can apply to fertility, pregnancy, labor, birth, postpartum. It's all so true. And we really have to address that, like how to support women physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to bring themselves back into a place of balance through the process.
because it's a very powerful process where we're giving our power away in that situation.
A lot of places that you can give your power away: to your doctor, to medicine, to fear, to family, which can be fear, like, why would you consider doing something different? Go this route. We trust this route. And what we want is for women to access their power through their innate wisdom by trusting their bodies. And of course, we've had lots of new information, maybe it's not even all new, but everything from optimal fetal positioning, like what's the best way for the baby to be positioned in order to enter into the birth canal appropriately, to the alignment of the uterus itself in the body and how important that is, because babies love space. If they don't have space, they can only go where they find that space. And that's where body work and chiropractic come into play, of being able to align the uterus, to release the ligaments, to do the things on the physical level that we can do. And then self-care is really important to me. So I'm always teaching women about what they can do for themselves and their own bodies to maintain that kind of alignment and balance. And so, I want to mention some of the people who have been my trainers and teachers that are part of how I integrated a lot of the information I've used. And that is, Spinning Babies is a wonderful resource for women and families of just how to prepare, how to use, in their words, balance, gravity, and movement to maintain that physiology before force, to use that instead of force in order to create that balance and harmony in the body. And Spinning Babies is more from a doula and midwife perspective. And then, of course, I want to mention my abdominal massage. To me, that is like one of the greatest tools I've ever found. I've been using it for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years now. And it's changed my experience of birth, because what we're doing is balancing the uterus, creating that alignment, and then passing on the self-care to help for women to be able to do that for themselves. And I think that's the key, is education. We have to be able to educate everybody, educate women what they're capable of, and let's talk about what's normal, right, for women, and choice, right? Like, instead of the choice being fear, what other choices do you have? What
Right.
is available?
Right. And it's birthing from within is something else that you've mentioned.
Birthing from Within is a wonderful class to take. There are also a lot of other great classes. It used to be very limited, but I believe that a lot of brilliant women have created birth classes. But Birthing from Within is one that's got a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. I know a lot of wonderful teachers. Atlanta's got some great ones. And at the end of the day, education in that way, childbirth education, is so important for even couples, because men, let's bring the men into it. Is funny story here is that when one of my children, he was not the first to give birth, but he was one of the oldest. And it was, his wife was pregnant, and he came over and I said, "So, honey, what do you think? Where do you see yourself in this birth? What do you see yourself doing?" He goes, "Honestly, Mama, I think I'm supposed to smoke a cigar and walk up and down the hallway," and wringing my hands. And I said, "Wow, okay." It's not 1950, baby. But I spent 4 hours with him and his wife. And at the end of that 4 hours, I said, "So how do you feel?" And he goes, "I am so happy. I'm so excited. I didn't have any idea that I could do something." I mean, and I hear that repeated over and over and over with dads all the time. It's like, there's something I can do. Show
Mm.
me. Tell me how I can help her. Because honestly, a lot of the time in our history, it's been otherwise. First of all, men weren't allowed.
Yeah.
And then we started with epidurals, came the event of, oh, well, you can have more people in the room with you because you're not screaming. And men do have a current role in birth that they haven't had before, that they are even often expected to have knowledge that they don't have, to act as in the role of birth partner and birth support. So we really need to educate them. And in my trainings, what I pass on to men is the physical hands-on care that they can support their partner with. But they also, in hospitals, they're playing another role. They're playing protector role. And, that might not be any different from the past. I believe in the past, they kind of sat outside the door with their shotgun in case they had to, chase off critters that smelled birth happening. But now, we took away their shotguns, and now we expect them to be really present and trained and educated. And often they are not. Often they are the ones like either, this has to stop. She needs medication. She needs surgery. And sadly, we still give the charge of birth to men. The man's voice in the room, the husband, will be heard before the woman. She can say, no, I don't want that. Stop that. Don't do that to me. And nobody responds. If he says, she said, stop that, everybody backs away. And that's where we just want to talk about one thing in here that I think is lost and needed. And it's called informed consent. It seems like a simple thing, like we should really be given informed consent anytime we enter into a medical situation, right? Here's what we're going to do, and here's what you can expect.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem complicated, does it? But instead, what happens is that unless you utter those words, you don't get it. They just do what they do, and they don't let you know. Somebody might grab your body and start doing something to it, and you don't even have any idea what's going on because they've entered into emergency mode. Then nobody takes the time to, okay, let's tell you what's going on. And, that has gotten really out of hand. And so there's education right there. We need informed consent. We need families to be able to say, we demand informed consent. Do not do anything to me or my baby without my consent. And yeah, you sign a bunch of consent forms, but they're consent forms that protect the hospital. We need to have consent forms to protect us from the hospital. Like that, we should go. And that's a birth plan, right? And it's not a legal document, but it is what we have. And so you want to be able to be informed about what can go on that birth plan and the choices that you actually have. And that is where education comes into play. And again, I want to say that education there is a plethora, even though I meet families all the time that don't understand simple stages of labor, simple the process of what to expect. So there's lots of that out there, and we'll leave lots of comments, links in the comments about that. So one of the things that I've experienced, and this happened just over the years as I went to births, there is no education better about birth than attending them. No training ever prepares you for the rawness of birth and all of the different situations that you come into contact with. And so you spoke about how it organically happened for me, that I wasn't just like, oh, I think I'll do this. And so let me get this training and that training and become this. Life just kept pulling me into those situations. And I've given birth 4 times, and it was all traumatic. None of it was empowered. And I, gave birth in 1974 and then in the 80s. And I entered into hospitals 15 years ago and started seeing exactly the same thing. Okay, maybe not twilight sleep, which is what they did with me with the scopolamine and morphine, but women were on their backs. They were not encouraged to move around. They were strapped to a monitor, tethered to their bed if they did get up. And everything was being treated like a medical event, like a medical procedure. And interventions were happening without permission. One of them was that I watched a doctor break a woman's water and never look her in the eye, never tell her what he was about to do, just looked at her husband talking about sports, took his elbow, pried her legs open, and broke her water without her permission. I was devastated, and I wish I could say that was the only time anything like that ever happened, but it happened so many times throughout the years that I would go out in my car so many times and cry after a birth. I cried for them treating her like a victim. I cried for her seeing herself as a victim. I cried for that baby who entered into this world in trauma and now ended up in NICU because of all the trauma. So many situations where I saw women seen as powerless and no voice and struggling very hard to try to get babies out, suffering. And you get to that point there, like, I don't think every woman needs to have an unmedicated birth, but let's choose medication versus um, no medication. Let's just put it like that and not even call that natural. Let's just call that medication or no medication. Natural is physiological. That's the process of the body going through what it needs to go through. Anything else we do is not natural. And so what we say is natural in this, paradigm that we have right now is, well, it was vaginal, or she didn't have an epidural. That's not natural. That's just standard of care that she's choosing not to have the typical standard of care that we have. But for a woman to move out of that suffering place, she needs to be in charge. She needs to be in charge of her body, of her birth. She needs her voice to be heard. No, I don't want that. Yes, that feels right. Both of those things are so important. And that's where my tears would come from, is her lack of being heard. That even me as her advocate in the room can't be her voice for her. She has to come to it willfully. And that's where the preparation of alignment is so important, because with alignment, with physical alignment and emotional and mental alignment of the community alignment, that all the providers and the space and the philosophies are all in alignment, that takes us out of that place of struggle and suffer into choice and trust and allowing that needs to happen so that women can have the birth that is meant for them. So if a situation is happening that she has to choose something that she didn't want because she thought she wanted natural, then if she is making that choice with all the information available, not based on fear, not based on data that might not apply to her, but literally what's happening, how am I, and how is my baby? Now, what do we do next? And really trusting that, then that's an empowered birth. So it's not to say we all just need to have these like, oh yeah, this lovely natural process and completely undisturbed. I love that, and I've seen it, and it works beautifully. But I also want to say that we have tools, mostly these, in my opinion, of how to help women as they move through that journey to keep coming back to that place of, the fear and the struggle and the suffering take you way out of your body or keep you up here locked in your head. But what we want is women in touch with, what do I feel? How is my baby? What does my body say I need to do right now? And maybe that's, I don't think I can do this any longer without some sort of intervention. Okay. Or a provider saying, we don't believe you can do this anymore without an intervention or augmentation. And a woman being able to say, you know, that doesn't feel right to me. I want more time, versus whatever you think, whatever you tell me, that's what I'll do. Because that's what we're used to. We're used to a physician who has the power that will say, yes, you know more than I do, so I'm going to do what you tell me.
Right.
And instead, being able to say, this is my body, this is my birth, this is my baby. And as a result of that alignment and all of the preparation and education, both physically and mentally and emotionally, and partner support, then we can come into this place where families have more skill set and more trust in what they know, and then they can interact with the environment that they've chosen. I mean, I love a birth center. I don't think they're all created equal. You had that experience, right? That the birth center you were in wasn't like the one that I work in every day. I'm really lucky, but I'm including a link to birth centers so that, an organization for that, and lots of ways to find out, lots of resources for what is evidence-based birth as opposed to a standard of care that has been put into place since back when I was getting twilight sleep. A lot of the same practices are still right there. And we don't, home birth is also wonderful, including a link for that. Home birth center, those are going to draw to it the one thing that we need so much of, and that is the tribe of women that we've gotten rid of in birth. To have a doula, to have a midwife, to have an environment that supports you within a community of women. I love giving birth at the birth center, with women that at the birth center that I work at, because when she is giving birth, she's got like 5 or 6 women surrounding her, and all of them trust what she's going through and supporting her in that way. And I want to see that model of care, like, just be when we aren't dealing with high risk birth. And also, defining that differently. But when we're not dealing with that, to be able to have in more environments. And the only way I know to do that is just keep educating people. For me, it's going to be with families and passing on my wisdom, where I've integrated a lot of these tools to help families have more information, and for women to feel more in their bodies. And that's at the end of the day, when she walks out of my office, that's what I want to know, is that right now feels like she's in her body. And however she chooses to be with that is her own personal journey. But, I want to know that my place in it, my role in it, was to remind her through touch, through knowledge, through passing on self-care, and really debunking all the myths. We didn't talk about that, but that might be a whole conversation to itself, that we just have so many myths about birth and about our bodies. We are trained, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. You can use it or not use it, but we are trained really to think in our culture that everything needs to be tight, We got to have these tight cores. We have to have a pelvic floor that's super strong. And we use things like yoga and Pilates and fitness to maintain that sort of thing. And I feel like it's such an injustice. Thank goodness we have more and more practices coming into this birth work with more knowledge about what can happen, how to create alignment. Body workers, chiropractors, pelvic floor therapists, all that, acupuncturists even, that are helping to maintain that physical balance and moving out of this place where we have, let's just talk a real, I just have to talk about this. I can't not. We have been seeing for decades, telling women, all women, do Kegels to have a strong pelvic floor so that you will have a strong pelvic floor for birth. You push that baby out. Unfortunately, what has happened about that is many decades of women with very messed up pelvic floors, very messed up. Mine, you know, my journey with my pelvic floor is what has helped me know as much as I do about a female pelvis because of all of the trauma from my births. But Kegels and that tightening and tightening and tightening, where we think everything's solid, like a baby comes down into that environment and all it does is meet resistance. And then we have women on their backs and their knees up. And so we're putting the trajectory, from the side to try to get a baby out. So we're not using gravity at all. In fact, if you think about the gravity while you're laying on your back, the heaviest part of the baby is going to rotate towards gravity, and that's going to be rolling into a posterior position, which is a very difficult way to push a baby out and causes a lot of damage to the pelvic floor and to the vaginal wall. And so by being able to trust our innate wisdom and follow her movements, I love to use dance moves for birth because, we want women to be in their bodies and feeling that, where do I need to be right now? Is it my hands and knees? Do I need to be walking around the room? How am I with my baby right now? That means that she's going to push her baby out, most likely standing up, kneeling in a birth tub, in a position that feels anatomically correct for her, not because she thinks it's correct, because she feels it. When that happens, babies come into the world and they're like, wow, hi, this is amazing. When it's gentle, when we've done it in an environment that is conducive to the parasympathetic nervous system of quiet, dark, soft music, gentle encouragement, and the trusting of the innate wisdom of her body, and a team that believes that and supports that. That's how we do it. The rest is education.
So thank you, Charlotte, for sharing everything. Both of our hopes is that this reaches the right people, that this helps people to inquire more, to be more curious, find out more information, and good luck birthing.
Gentle birth waves. That's what we always hope for, and gentle outcomes. It used to be said, happy babies, happy mommies, but how about happy mommies, happy babies?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.